Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome back to another episode of Forza Top Gear Laps. Today we're going to be taking another look at DLC cars. Now last time we did the first 3 car packs, this time round we are covering the January and February DLC packs only. I've taken my favourite cars from those packs and they are going to be going around the Top Gear test track. The first vehicle today is the Pontiac Aztek, 185 brake horsepower, 3,923 pounds of weight. This is our heaviest vehicle here today, not really surprisingly. Yeah, the Aztek is a very odd car. It's weird to look at, and it's basically pretty much awful in every single conceivable way. First off, it has a terrible gearbox. This really does have one of the worst gearboxes we've ever dealt with around here. Now, say the Ford GT40 back in Forza Motorsport 5, that had a similar sort of gearbox, but that car was a lot quicker. This one, I believe it's in first gear up to about 55 miles an hour, and then second gear up to over 100. So this never got out of its first 2 gears during its entire lap around here. I didn't even use third gear. I don't know how many gears this vehicle actually has. The next issue with this is it has the differential one tyre fire issue. Now this vehicle is actually front wheel drive. I didn't realise that when I was driving this. I thought it was 4-wheel drive just with a really dodgy differential. But no, it's front wheel drive. So you get a lot of smoke coming from one of the wheels. The revs will rise up fantastically. You can redline it just by cornering at 30 miles an hour. It's a very weird issue. It didn't really happen too much back in Forza Motorsport 5. It did with some of the hot hatches, but that was about it. I don't know why it does it, but it does, so yeah. And not to mention the fact that the Aztek's a little bit wallowy because it's very high up. It wasn't a great car for around here, but I just love the fact it's in this game now. Next up we have the Subaru SVX, 230 horsepower, 3,580 pounds of weight. This is the second most powerful car here today. And the SVX was a very good car. This has loads of grip. There's so much grip in this car. It's really incredible, actually. It's probably one of the better 4-wheel drive cars we've ever had around here as far as handling's concerned. And as far as speed and stuff's concerned, 230 brake horsepower, it isn't that much compared to some of the vehicles that have been around this track. But it certainly isn't bad. I mean, it's the second most powerful vehicle here today, as I said. And yeah, the 230 isn't bad. It is on the heavier side. You don't really feel the weight when you're driving it, but yeah, it is a heavy car, which means it isn't going to be fantastically quick. But there you go. The SVX is it's another odd looking car. I would say this looks much better than the Aztek, but it's still very strange. It kind of reminds me of an S13 Silvia. From many angles, but I prefer over an S13 Silvia. I also like the fact that the windows are interesting, to say the least. It's also a decent enough sounding car, flat 6 engine, so it's got a very distinctive engine note. And overall, yeah, the SVX was a good car. I really enjoyed driving this actually, and it did surprise me. It really did, which is good. Next up we have the Alfa Romeo Milano, or also known as the Alfa Romeo 75 if you come from anywhere that isn't Italy, I believe. 185 horsepower, 2,866 pounds of weight. This is another 4-wheel drive car, which means it's also going to be relatively grippy. And the Alfa Romeo was good. It was an enjoyable car to drive. It's actually quite fun. It's very chuckable, this car. You can throw it into corners and it will just take them up. I do have to admit, you do lose grip. You'll see occasionally it gets a bit smoky around this lap. You do eventually lose grip. It's nowhere near as grippy as the SVX was. But, I mean, I guess that makes it a bit more fun. The SVX isn't a particularly fun car, whereas this is very much a fun Alfa Romeo. I haven't driven too much of the 155, it hasn't been around the track yet, but I suspect that the Alfa 155 will be relatively the same when that finally ends up going round. Yeah, the Milano was just good. That's the best way to describe it. Decent gearbox, had decent amount of grip. Did lose traction after a while, but it's very easy to control it afterwards. It wasn't, you know, it doesn't slide out of control. It's very easily controllable once it does lose grip. So that's good. yeah, that's all I can really say about the Alfa. It was just a good car to drive, really. Maybe a bit on the slow side. 185 horsepower isn't a lot, but yeah, still pretty fun car to drive. Next up we have the Opel Kadett C GT-E, 114 horsepower, 2,028 pounds of weight. This is the lightest vehicle here today. And this was probably the most surprising because this thing is a ludicrous amount of fun. It's so fun to drive. It's incredible, really. I could see myself driving this thing stock around, I don't know, Catalonia school and having the time of my life with it because it's fantastic. The first thing you really notice with this car is just how light it is and how light it feels. It's got steering very similar to the 2007 Honda Civic Type R, which we had around here an awful long while ago. Basically, that vehicle had like huge amounts of turning grip, and this has a similar sort of thing. Now, the rear end will come loose on the Kadett. It is rear-wheel drive, but it just adds to the fun factor. It's got so much charm, this little car. It's actually really surprising. It's a very, very good car to drive. I also think it's a decent enough car to look at. I love the two-tone white and yellow it's got going on. Yeah, the Kadett is definitely fun. 114 horsepower. It's the second least powerful car here today, but it's more than adequate for what the Kadett does. Any more power than this, and I think the car may even be a bit uncontrollable and not as nice to drive. But the Kadett, it's got just the right amount of power. Honestly, it feels a bit like a Mazda MX-5. That's probably the closest thing to this vehicle. It sounds really strange. But yeah, it does remind me of the Mazda MX-5 in the way this thing drives. Very, very good car, very fun car to drive. I recommend giving that one a go. Next up, we've got the Toyota Corolla. This is the 1974 model, 88 horsepower, 2,065 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful car here today, and yeah, it comes in brown, so I had to obviously have one in this really horrible bronzy brown whatever sort of colour it is. Now, 88 horsepower I believe is exactly the same as you get from the 1966 Nissan Silvia, so I kind of wanted to see how this vehicle would compare to the 1966 Nissan Silvia. The Corolla actually handled remarkably similar to the Nissan Silvia. It's not particularly quick. It's alright through the corners. This does have the differential issue again. I don't think it's got it quite as bad as the Silvia did off the top of my head. It's been a while since I drove the 1966 Silvia. But I don't think the differential problem is as bad as it was in the Silvia, but you can still see it through the corners. It's not the best. Yeah, the Corolla was essentially just like driving the Silvia. Now, it isn't that much fun. This thing could certainly do with a lot more power. It is fantastically slow in a straight line. 88 brake horsepower, I mean, it's just not a lot. That would probably make this one of the least powerful cars to ever go around the Top Gear track. At least in our case, I believe so. But yeah, the Corolla, not a huge amount of fun, but still it's nice to see another one of these old Japanesey cars in the game, and it's also going to make a very good rival to the Nissan Silvia. Stay tuned to the end to find out how well that did. Next up, we've got the Sunbeam Tiger, 200 horsepower, 2,560 pounds of weight. Yes, that is a V8 in this vehicle. It's a very, very strange car, this. You sort of look at this and think it's just going to have, you know, a little 4-cylinder engine, maybe 80 brake horsepower, but no, it's got a big Ford V8 in it. 289 cubic litres, I believe, of engine in this. I don't even think litres is the correct thing, but whatever. Yeah, this is a very nice sounding car. It's also fantastically quick. It's actually really nice to drive. This is so much fun to drive. If the Kadett was a surprise, this is also a surprise. I can't quite choose between which of the two cars was the more enjoyable to drive. But yeah, the Tiger was actually quite decent when it comes to its handling as well. You can get the rear two-step out, but it's actually surprisingly difficult, which is something you really wouldn't expect from the Sunbeam Tiger. Yeah, it's a very odd car, and I do really, really like it. Good car to drive. I can imagine it would be quite crazy with some form of race build put on it. We may have to investigate that at some point. But yeah, the Sunbeam Tiger, great to drive car, very, very quick. Relatively decent looking, I guess. It does look a bit generic 60s convertible, but it's still a nice looking car. And yeah, very fun to drive. And finally today we have the Holden Monaro GTS 350, 275 brake horsepower, 3,150 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful car here today, and yeah, this is another one of those stock factory colours. It does come in pink. This car actually comes in a number of really nice colours, so I had to go with the silliest of all of them. I don't think we've ever had a pink car go round the Top Gear track, so hey, Holden Monaro is gonna be it. So, the Monaro to drive, well, we had classic muscle cars around not too long ago, and it drives extremely similar to a classic muscle car. Kind of reminds me of a Camaro, just with a bit less power, to be honest with you. That's sort of how this vehicle drives. I often say that this vehicle does look like a Chevrolet Camaro. Some people say it looks like a Pontiac GTO. I think it kind of looks like a mixture of the both, really. It's not my favourite of the muscle cars, to be honest with you, but still I kind of wanted to see how it would compete with both the other Holdens that have gone round and the other classic muscle cars, which we have seen go around the track. But yeah, there's nothing particularly remarkable when it comes to handling. It's got a 4-speed transmission, which isn't great, but to be honest with you, it tops out about 120. That's all you really need around this track when you've only got so much power. Yeah, 275, I think it could do with a bit more, maybe about 325, but it's certainly not a bad car overall. And it has a little bit of a slide around there, and onto the times. And the Subaru SVX was the fastest car of the day with a 1:30.676. Beats out an AMC Rebel by just a little bit, Clio RS. That's actually a pretty decent time overall for that sort of vehicle. Holden Monaro goes into 117th, 131.418, putting it straight bang in the middle between a Camaro and an El Camino. So yeah, that's kind of what I expected. And the Sunbeam Tiger, a 131.929, which is actually a pretty decent time, beats out a 65 Ford Mustang, which is quite interesting. The Alfa Romeo Milano goes into 123rd with a 132.879, slightly slower than a Volvo 850R, which is kind of what you'd expect, I guess. Moving on down the board, the Opel Kadett goes into 131st with a 138.308, slightly slower than the limo, but faster than a Fiesta XR2. Pontiac Aztek 134th, and it does a 143.066, faster than a Nissan Silvia and the Toyota Corolla, which did a 144.326, slower than the Silvia, but I think it's slightly heavier, I'm not too sure. But yeah, the Aztek actually surprised me. It beat the Silvia and the Corolla, which is quite incredible when you think it's a Pontiac Aztek. Anyway, friends, that is going to be it for today's episode. Next time, I'm not quite sure what we're going to be doing, but yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. And as always, I want to thank you all very much for watching. My name's been The Real Emile. Until next time, farewell.